Welcome back to Kings of the North. Doug Lesmerises, joined soon by Dan Wetzel, who will stop by for his regular Tuesday appearance. We usually start with Dan. We're not going to start with Dan this week. He'll join us around 12:30 to help us take a bigger picture look at USC and Michigan this week. I think sort of a line in the sand, time to find out about yourselves game for both of those teams. So we'll talk about that. Even though USC's not in the North, it's like whatever. They're a cousin. They're a cousin up the North. We also have Jason Campbell, Toledo head coach, coming off a gigantic win for the MAC. First win for the MAC against an SEC team since 2015. We talked to Jason Campbell. He will join us later in the show. Bill Landis with his block and punt of the week. And then we'll talk about Illinois. Huge game at Nebraska on Friday night. Jeremy Werner of the Illini Inquirer will join us later in the show to talk about that. But want to do like a little bit, listen, this is not like a news show because I don't want to be beholden to the news. So then it's like, oh, there's no news if we can't have a show today. But when there's stuff happening, we want to catch you up with some stuff going on around the country. So we'll run through a couple things here that are on my mind before we get into Jason Campbell. We're going to start with BYU, which is probably, as we cover 28 teams, is probably maybe the team we talk about the least, but well, we don't have their banner. Again, like I couldn't get their banner. I gotta figure out a way to get a BYU banner. If you're a BYU person who knows how to get us a banner like this, let me know. I want to get a banner. BYU is in a super interesting spot. They're hosting Kansas State, 8:30 local start on Saturday night. And we just want to be like on alert that this is like a kind of a goofy spot for Kansas State. BYU has a history of being pretty good in prime time, and they expect, Kalani Sitake said this week, the head coach, they expect to get Micah Harper, who's a really good safety for them, who missed last year with an ACL. They expect to have him back in this game. He played in the opener against Southern Illinois. They only played 5 snaps against SMU and missed last week against Wyoming. Sitake said he should be back this week, and they're going to be wearing throwbacks. You know how the people get fired up through the throwbacks. BYU is going to be wearing throwbacks to the 1996 season. It's one of those things when you're my age and you think like, why would you throw it back to 1996? That just happened. 1996. I mean, I remember 1996. It actually turns out, I looked this up, 1996 is quite a long time ago. Steve Sarkisian, Texas head coach, was the BYU quarterback that year. They went 14-1, finished number 5 in the country. They're throwing it back to that. So everybody at BYU is going to be fired up. We'll talk about all the games on Thursday. Just want to like lay down that alert right now and if Micah Harper is back, that is a fairly significant deal for the secondary for BYU. So we are noting that. We are noting Syracuse coming off a bye. Syracuse has been throwing the ball really well. We had Trevor Pena on last week, their slot receiver, to talk about that. They're throwing it to Aronde Gadsden, the tight end. Zeed Haynes from Georgia is there. But we don't want to forget about Justice Ross Simmons, who was a pretty big-time transfer from Colorado State in the offseason. He has been out so far this year, and Fran Brown this week said he could be back. He's not guaranteed to play, but he's back practicing, Fran Brown said. So everything we've thought about the Syracuse offense so far and the way they're throwing the ball. And by the way, in EPA per play, which is just a way to judge. I'm not a math expert. If I was a math expert, I wouldn't be shouting about sports into a microphone. EPA per play is just a way to sort of judge offenses that's a little better than just yards per game, points per game. It takes in opponents. It takes in just like how well you're doing on a play-to-play basis. In offensive EPA per play, last year, Syracuse offensively was 93rd in the nation. So far, they're 6th. Now, they've only played 2 games, but this offense is vastly improved, and Justice Ross Simmons has not been there. So keep your eyes out. He could be back. They are hosting Stanford on Friday night. A couple of Friday night Northern bangers. We have Syracuse, Stanford, and we have Illinois going to Nebraska, which we'll talk about later. Like it's still bubbling at Syracuse. And Fran Brown was asked about like getting fans out, getting students out. And he was like, when it comes to the students, I know where they'll be Friday night, so it's not an issue. He's like, I'm good with the students. Me and the students, we're cool. Me and the students got a good relationship, so they're going to be there. So sometimes it takes a little time, and he talked about that. He said we've got to show some consistency. And then people will start to show up more. Their capacity in the JMA Dome. Hold on a second. Got to take a sip of water here. It's not water. It's Diet Coke. Sorry. I can't lie to you guys. Their capacity is about 49,000 for their stadium. They drew 37,000 for their first game, 39,500 against Georgia Tech for their second game. You got to pile it up. He acknowledges that, but he was asked about the students coming. He was like, the students were good. They're going to be there. We have to be consistent enough. We have a long way to go for people to feel like I need to be there. I have to be there. That's the rest of the fans. He's good with the students. He called it the battle for the Block S, Syracuse versus Stanford. Interesting game. Sort of like next step possibilities for Stanford here. So I thought that was for Syracuse. Stanford's fine. Next step possibilities for Syracuse. We've talked a lot about them, but there might be even more for their passing game. Penn State, just like Syracuse coming off a bye, they're looking to get KJ Winston, one of their 3 really good safeties, back. He could be back. Not sure. Some young guys that have been repping there. So watch for that. Playing another MAC team this week, Penn State's still sort of easing into it, but that is a moderately big deal. KJ Winston, just like Micah Harper, one of the best safeties in the North. And then I do want to talk about the Iowa offense. We do want to talk about the Iowa offense because the Iowa offense, this is a huge game, Floyd of Rosedale against Minnesota on Saturday. And the Iowa offense kind of saved Iowa on Saturday against Troy. Now, they got booed off the field. You get booed off the field, then you kind of save a victory. They got booed off the field because they're losing 14-10 to Troy at the half. There's like a minute left in the first half. They have a chance to maybe drive and try to kick a field goal. And Kirk Ferentz just runs it twice and then heads to the locker room. And the fans don't like that. He said afterward, he didn't want to make a bad situation worse when nothing was happening offensively. So that's a negative reaction to that. But then they came out and outscored Troy 28-7 in the second half. The Iowa defense has been giving up a couple big plays, which is unusual for them, but Iowa gained 462 yards on Saturday. It was the second time in 3 games they've been over 400 yards this season. Last year, they were over 400 yards once the whole year. So this is the new world. Now, it's not like a whole new world. It's sort of like, it's not like Iowa's offense got in a ship and sailed across an ocean and discovered a new continent. But they went to a new town. They didn't just stay where they were. Maybe they didn't get in a ship. Maybe they got in an ox cart. But you didn't just stay where you were, right? You left. You left in pursuit of something better. Caleb Johnson, the back we love to talk about on the show, has 2 rushing touchdowns in every game so far. He has 6 rushing touchdowns on the year. Cade McNamara last week was 19 of 23 for 176 yards. And again, EPA per play. We're talking about just sort of like how well your team, how well your offense does its job play to play. 2021 in the nation, Iowa 127th in offensive EPA per play. 2022, 130th. Last year, 133rd. It's basically the bottom. They're in the bottom 10 every year. So this is what we're talking about. Nominal improvement. Better than the worst. 3 games in, they're 84th. And that is a success. They had Brendan Sullivan, their backup quarterback, as a little bit of like a wrinkle option, a little bit of like a red zone. Let's run the quarterback, throw a shovel pass, like something a little bit different. They still are leaning on the run game. That's okay. But they've improved. And this is a huge game because I think Minnesota and Iowa, we've talked a lot about Wisconsin sort of going and undergoing a huge offensive makeover with Phil Longo, with the air raid offense coming in. And now 1 season and 3 games in to the tenure of Luke Fickell and Phil Longo, maybe not looking so great. And Wisconsin people don't love it. What Minnesota and Iowa have done is not that kind of transformation, but it is an evolution, and it is required. And the Big Ten West, the former Big Ten West, it's fitting, I think, that division is gone, and people are trying to leave the past behind when it comes to the way they played. Because If you didn't watch the show, if you're new to Kings of the North, you didn't see it before. We did a farewell to the Big Ten West in the offseason. Go find that. It was a good show. Leaving the past behind, because you could hide in a bubble when you were in the Big Ten West and be conservative and not put up many points and have a good defense and figure you might have a backdoor path to Indianapolis in the Big Ten championship game that way. Those days are gone. So if you don't want to go and undergo a complete transformation, you at least need an evolution. Iowa with Tim Lester, that's what they've done. And Minnesota with Max Brosmer as a transfer quarterback, Greg Harbaugh, the offensive coordinator, they know they need to do that too. So PJ Fleck this week has talked about, hey, Tim Lester's done a good job, but still Kirk Ferentz has his fingerprints all over that offense. They're kind of the same thing, but they're better within who they are. And Minnesota's doing the same thing. They're talking about, we're going to throw to set up the run. We're not just going to pound the ball with run. Yes, Darius Taylor was back last week and had a huge game. But I'm really curious, this head-to-head matchup this week between Iowa and Minnesota, the evolutions of those offense. EPA per play offensively. I said last year, Iowa was 133rd in the nation. Minnesota was 112, not much better. This year, Iowa 84, Minnesota 64. So are we living in a world where we look at your offense and say, hey, you're 64th in the nation. Hey, you're 84th in the nation. Congratulations. Here. You're 64th. 64th. Congrats. We'll send that. We'll pop this in the mail. Right? Congrats. Because guess what? It's a lot better than 112th. Let's see how this works out. This is a head-to-head confrontation. How far are these offenses down the road? That's what I'm looking for this week. Looking forward to it. Looking forward to Iowa, Minnesota, battle for Floyd of Rosedale. Okay. On Tuesdays, we don't have Bill Landis live with us. We know that hurts your heart. So we sprinkle in a little Bill Landis because he brings us every Tuesday the punt and block of the week in the North. Here's Bill Landis.
Bill Landis back here with your Kings of the North punt and block of the week, and we're switching it up this week because Cincinnati's kicker did something really cool, so we're calling this kick and block of the week. Actually, it's kicks and block of the week, and we're going to start with Cincinnati kicker Nathan Hawks. Here's Nathan Hawks. He's a walk-on from Division III Wittenberg. He's never kicked in a game before, so what does Scott Satterfield do? He throws him out there for a 55-yarder to give Cincinnati a 3-0 early lead in its rivalry game against Miami of Ohio. And reminder, Nathan Hawks has never kicked in a Division I game before, but here he is again at the end of the game, 50 yards to ice it for the Bearcats and an opportunity for Miami to get the ball back and potentially drive for the tie. Nathan Hawks is true from 50. That thing's good from 80. He bombs it. First Cincinnati kicker to hit 2 50-plus yard field goals in a game. Awesome stuff there from Nathan Hawks. He won the job during the week of the Miami-Ohio game. Safe to say he has that thing locked up for the foreseeable future after 2 50-yard field goals in a rivalry game. Let's turn now to the block of the week. We're going up to Northwestern, setting the tone early in its game against Eastern Illinois. Third play of the game for Northwestern here. I want you to watch the left side of the offensive line. It's left tackle Caleb Tiernan. It's left guard Cooper Lovelace. They work together and just annihilate the defensive end. They absolutely steamroll him. He's part of the turf now. New stadium there, temporary stadium. He's a permanent part of the turf now in Northwestern. Sorry about it. Great work there from those two guys that helped spring this big run. And if you say to me, Bill, this is Northwestern, this is Eastern Illinois, of course Northwestern should do this. Tell it to Mississippi State. How well did they block a quote-unquote lesser opponent? All right, you got to bring it. I don't care who you're playing. Good stuff from Northwestern here. Gets me fired up, man. Congratulations to Nathan Hawks, to Caleb Tiernan, to Cooper Lovelace for making it on this week's Kings of the North kicks, and block of the week. We'll be back next week with more blocks, maybe some punts, maybe some kicks. I don't know, but we'll see you then.
You know what gets me fired up? Landis saying, tell it to Mississippi State. So I love the punt and block of the week breakdown, even when it's not really a punt. Do just want to note this quickly. We talked about this on the Monday show as well. Nathan Hawks, the kicker that Landis just cited from Wittenberg College, had started his career there, and we called him the Wittenberg Hammer, like remarkable story. And Wittenberg just announced here on Tuesday, right before we were doing the show, that all their athletic events are canceled through Sunday. And they've been on remote work for their classes, and it's because of some security threats that were particularly naming Haitian immigrants. And it's just like super unfortunate that you have this guy who's kicking at Cincinnati, he was kicking at Wittenberg not so long ago, right? Who was at Wittenberg for a year to start his football journey many moons ago? Al Davis. Al Davis was at Wittenberg before he transferred to Syracuse. And I just like this generation of kids, like the young people who are in college right now, they had stuff taken away from them, like in their formative years by COVID and not getting to do some things in high school that they normally would have gotten to do. And now they're in college. And now we have a situation where there's some students and athletes who are having this very specific time in their lives interrupted. It's just like super unfortunate. So thoughts with everybody at Wittenberg and everybody else affected by this. It's just like, we gotta let our kids, have these opportunities, these rare, life goes by really fast, man. So Wittenberg has announced that, and hopefully they can get back to classes and athletic events and everything else very soon. Okay, let's go now to Jason Campbell. Tell it to Mississippi State. Landis should have told that to Jason Campbell because Toledo went down and beat Mississippi State on Saturday. And when we have a northern team like that taking care of business against the South, we're always going to try to get them on Kings of the North, and Toledo and Jason Campbell were gracious enough to grant us a little bit of time to talk about the Rockets taking care of business. Joined now on Kings of the North by a vanquisher of the South, a true king of the North, Jason Campbell, Toledo head coach. Jason, thanks for your time.
Thanks for having me on, Doug.
This is a Northern college football show. There could be nothing better than a Northern MAC team going into SEC country and taking care of business. This is a gift to us. So thank you for doing it. Did you do it for the North? Did you feel that going in? You're going to go do this for the North?
That was definitely on my mind for sure. But yeah, no, obviously a tremendous experience for our football team and our program to go down there and get a win against a quality opponent. And it's really hard to go on the road, for your first game of the year, not alone when it's a quality opponent like that. So I'm really proud of our team for staying in there for all 60 minutes and all three phases and doing what was required to get a tough victory.
When you are facing a game like this, you've been grinding it out and having great success in the MAC. When you're going on the road to an SEC opponent, how differently do you think as a coach? How differently do you game plan as a coach? Or is it, we are who we are, we do what we do?
Yeah, I think a little bit of both. This is not a familiar opponent for us, not a familiar staff to go up against. So there's not a lot of going back and watching previous years and what they did against you and that kind of thing, which, you can really get down in a tough hole once you start doing that in conference play. So the amount of videotape, the amount of things that are at your fingertips to be able to go back and watch, sometimes it's overwhelming. So, you really try to do a good job focusing on you, understanding and telling your team and, portraying the message that things are not going to go your way the entire time. And really, ultimately our fate would be determined by the responses to the adverse moments and really do a good job of pouring into that. Put your energy there because that's where it's going to matter. Stop worrying about things that don't matter, and, when you go to that type of environment, it's so easy to think outside in rather than inside out. And, I think we got a good leadership on our team that really held us in there in some tough moments. And, we kind of controlled the narrative because we were inside out thinkers.
First win by a MAC team against an SEC team since Toledo went down and beat Arkansas in 2015. It's a great win for the team. What does it mean, you think, for the program in the world of college football right now when Toledo plants a flag by winning a game like this? What does it do for the Rockets at large?
Well, I think it's a huge statement in recruiting. And I think everything that, we want to do, is continue to move the program forward, and recruiting, is the lifeblood of your program. So to be able to, have a statement type win like that, and to, be able to walk into living rooms and high schools and really, show that this is not just something that you're dreaming of, you're speaking out of testimony rather than theory. And I think that, that's a major deal. So, what it looks like outside, again, I'm back to that inside out type of thinking and that type of process to where, if we can do what we need to do week in and week out on a weekly basis, have the behaviors that are going to drive the behaviors that will allow you to be successful, I think all that other stuff will take care of yourself. But, I certainly don't want to, portray to our team or anybody out there listening that what we did Saturday doesn't have a great deal of magnitude and isn't very impactful for what our future of our team is and our program is, because it is. But it's got to be, you got to use that the right way, and you got to use that to continue. And if you go lay an egg this weekend, it doesn't really matter. So the challenges are still to get ready to go play Saturday again, because we got a great opponent Saturday.
This is such a thing, right? I mean, it is a real thing. Coaching young men of how you take a great win and don't let it beat you the next week. Like what is the key for that? I always say, it's like, can you not smile in practice the week after a big win? Do you have to coach them even harder? Like we've seen too many teams get tripped up by this. What is the playbook for great win, but let's make sure that we take care of business the week after?
Yeah, it's a great question, and obviously a very slippery slope there. I think the key thing is, can you continuously, no matter who you are, whether you're Toledo, whether you're Georgia, Ohio State, it doesn't matter. You have to have enough confidence, by that time that football is kicked off, that you're going to go play really, really well on Saturday. And then you have to hit a quick reset, and you have to have enough humility to go prepare really, really well to do it again the following week. And if there's any holes in that process, and there's any moment of, man, we're on top of the world because of what we just did yesterday. I mean, the famous quote of yesterday's home runs don't win today's games. I mean, that's so true in college football, just because of the parity. So, the rosters are changing each and every year. Everybody's got good players. That just becomes that is the most difficult thing to continue to reset. And it's not only just the 18 to 22-year-old people. It's everybody in your organization. It's the adults. It's the you can't control the narrative of the media in your city, but you want to do the best job you can to make sure all arrows are aligned to understand that you have to reset. And like I said, you have to have enough humility to go prepare and have a great approach to playing the next following game.
What was that locker room like after getting a win like that, when you go in with your guys after winning in SEC country?
I mean, obviously an unbelievable feeling, right? Special, just a, electric type of feeling for those kids, what you've worked really, really hard for. And I mean, I get it, right? I'm as coach speak sometimes as anybody, but you can sit and tell me that, Duquesne's just as important as Mississippi State is when the schedule comes out, and what a young man thinks about, but that's not true, and that's not any disrespect to Duquesne or anybody else that's on your schedule. That's just the game that, that's a school that where many of our guys on our team will probably think they should have been recruited to play for. And now they get a chance to play against them, and they have a chip on their shoulder. They want to prove, they want to show that they belong on that stage, and and when they understand the things that are required to do that, and they have that chip, that becomes a special thing, and that creates special feelings like that locker room after the game.
You talked about this, Jason, but having evidence, right, in this world of NIL, of the transfer portal, where every coach knows that you're kind of re-recruiting your entire roster every year, to have that evidence, to be able to say to your players, like, everything you want is here, right? Everybody's got to look out for their own best interests, but what you're searching for, we have it right here. How much that evidence seems even more important than it ever was before, back in a world where if you got a kid for 4 years, he's going to stay there for 4 years. Is that to be able to have this proof? This is what Toledo can be. Does it even mean more in this modern world?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think that you want to be able to, again, have tangible things that, why Toledo? Well, you have a great education. You have a first-class city that supports the university. You share the city's name, on your jersey. They've been playing good football here for 50 years, like a lot of that stuff is so consistent, and we've been able to be successful because of the support and that our program does get. That resonates with a 40-year-old man or a 50-year-old man who's watched decades of college football, but that doesn't always resonate with an 18 to 22-year-old kid. So it now then becomes the narrative in the story and the sell. It becomes a little bit more obvious, and you want to have moments like that in your program. And we just had Quinyon Mitchell picked in the first round of the draft at corner, so the number one corner taken off the board, and he's starting for the Philadelphia Eagles as a rookie. So there's one. You go to Mississippi State and you're able to get a win in SEC country. There's two. Can you continually put those things in front of people that are, hey, I can paint a picture, because no man's success has any bearing on the next one. So just because Deontay Johnson was a great football player here, or Lance Moore was a great football player here, or Kareem Hunt was a great football player here, or Quinyon Mitchell does not mean the next guy is going to be. So you want to have things that are fresh and they're in their face that, hey, if I do what I'm supposed to do, I can get to where I want to be if I play right here with good people and I'm part of a good program.
We're not going to get ahead of ourselves with Toledo because you got to go win the next one and the next one, the next one. But the conversation for the MAC in the playoff world, for that group of 5 spot, when you talk about Northern Illinois beating Notre Dame, when you talk about you guys going down and winning an SEC country, what do you think what does it require for the MAC to be in the thick of that conversation at the end of the season when we're talking about a playoff spot?
Well, ultimately, you got to control what you can control, right? Like you have to handle you and not worry about anything else. And spending time or energy on that, I think to me is just a waste of time, and I get it. I understand the narrative. I understand the storyline. I understand all of that. And quite honestly, I really respect it because you put your name is involved in those type of conversations. But any time and energy leading into week 4 of the football season that, within our walls is focused on that, I think is foolish. It's wasted time. And it takes away from what the goal is. And the goal here is just constant improvement to try to get to the next week to play your best. So you don't trip up and you don't have, mistakes and you don't underperform and you don't put yourself in a position where you're scratching your head on Sunday and worrying about what happened or wondering about what happened. You control the narrative because you don't put your fate in other people's hands.
What was it like on the sideline for you when you guys didn't just go down and win? You guys went and controlled the game. What's it like as that's unfolding? Again, you're focused on the thing, but there's got to be a feeling there for you, knowing all the work that you and your staff have put in at Toledo. Just when your guys play like that, I mean, there's got to be pride coming out of you, even in the moment. We talked about the post-game locker room, but to see your guys execute, man, that's what coaches dream of. Yeah,
I mean, I was the offensive coordinator, in that win against Arkansas that you mentioned. So, I've lived this before, and that was a different type of ball game. That was, it required a block punt. It required, an interception on the goal line to seal the game. So just a different feeling. This one was due to our ability to maintain drives in the first half and really their inability to complete some tough third downs. Our defense doing a good job of making sure they were behind the sticks the entire first half. It created a little bit of a cushion and a little bit of a lead. And, the challenge there becomes like, can you still maintain the same juice and energy that you did when you started the game? And can you go play the next 30 minutes after half and not allow some comeback? Because, the week before, Mississippi State was in a similar position against Arizona State, and it came down to the final possession. So we knew well in hand what they were capable of doing and what was being said in the other locker room. And I think it was just about us maintaining our consistency and not worrying about, again, the other things that we can't control and just trying to control the narrative ourselves. But proud of our team because, you didn't have the self-inflicting errors. You didn't, you didn't have the major mistakes in the kicking game. There wasn't a bunch of pre-snap penalties and things that, that the environment could maybe force upon you or create for you. So really proud of our team for that.
Last thing, Jason, before I let you go. We're not in the same room, so I can't actually give you this. And plus, this sword cost me too much money, so I could only give it to you for a week. But I want to ceremonially present you with this sword of the North for going down to the South and slaying an SEC foe. So, you guys earned this week, man.
With all humility, we accept. Thank you.
Look at that. The Rockets. We do this show, Jason. We created this show this year, and the North is rising up. Toledo rose up, man. I want everybody in this part of the country to be proud when a team like this takes care of business like that. We get it. The MAC, we get it. There's great competition and everybody roots for their own team. But in this part of the country up here, when you guys go down and do that, wherever it snows, you should be celebrating this Toledo win, right?
Well, overwhelming amount of obviously emails, texts, phone calls from people all over the country that, that would feed right into the narrative that you're talking about. And, I think it's when you play football up here and from the high school grassroots all the way up until pro football, there's a different type of pride and, sense of urgency to perform at a high level and perform well. And we're just happy that we could be part of that this weekend by getting a great win for our kids in our locker room and for our program.
Great win. Congratulations. Rockets doing the North proud. Jason Campbell, thanks for your time here on KOTN.
Thanks for having me. Go Rockets.
Man, just the emotion, right? The emotion from a coach when you present him a ceremonial sword. over video. I mean, I just for Jason Campbell. I mean, there's one thing to beat Mississippi State on the road, and there's another to get a sword. So, congratulations to the Rockets. Thanks to Toledo for making Jason Campbell available to us. When we come back after this break, it's time to talk about another gigantic Michigan game and what it means for the whole Big Ten, what it means for the rest of the seasons for USC and for Michigan. And we'll get into all of that and then much more next on Kings of the North. We are back on Kings of the North. Doug Lesmerises joined now by Dan Wetzel for his regular Tuesday appearance. We'll take any thumbs, any likes you guys want to drop here on YouTube. If you're here and you haven't been subscribed, go ahead and subscribe. If you're listening back on a podcast and we drop a review or whatever, we certainly appreciate all the assistance here. And Dan, as always, very nice to welcome you back to Kings of the North.
Thanks for having me on. Hope I'm not too big here. It seems like I'm too close.
Well, you are too big.
People.
You are too big.
There we
for
go.
us, Dan,
How's that? That a little better? I don't know.
Yeah. We're shrinking Dan Wetzel. We're shrinking Dan Wetzel. We'll fit you in the show one way or the other. So, Dan, I want to talk about Michigan USC with you. I don't always want to talk about Michigan with you just because you live in Detroit. But, I mean, I think this is a big game, and I think this is an opportunity to do this. I'm operating a little bit under the theory that this is a little bit of a pathway in the woods. Are we going left or right here for both the USC and Michigan programs? Because for Michigan, it's a really difficult September schedule, but if you get to 2-2 and you still have uncertainty at quarterback, I'm very curious about how the rest of the season unfolds. And this is an opportunity for USC coming off a bye in its first Big Ten game to come into the Midwest, to come into the Big Ten, to come into this conference and announce itself. So I think for both teams, like the result here, even though it's a 12-team playoff, even though it's September, I think really matters. Do you agree with that idea, or am I just a guy on a podcast hyping up a game because it's college football?
No, I think you got it right. This is the challenge that USC signed up for, right?
Yep.
This is what they wanted as part of the money. Can we go into the historic powerhouse programs in the Midwest, hold our own, and prove that we're going to be one of the top 2-3 programs in the Big Ten, the way we've always been one of the top, really the number one, but it's certainly in the top 2 real contenders year in, year out in the Pac-12. And everyone said, hey, yeah, you're going to get the money, but you may get knocked around. Look what happened to Nebraska. Look what happened to other schools. Like, are you sure you can compete, particularly in the trenches, particularly on the lines, physicality, all the travel, right? So, big environments, big stadiums they don't have out in the Pac-12. So this is it. USC, Michigan, I guess their first meeting ever in Ann Arbor. You got the big stadium. You got the great defensive line in Michigan. What can USC do? Are they going to plant that flag and say, look, we are a legit Big Ten team. We're not just here for the money. We think we can be the national program, the national powerhouse that we have been in the past, playing in the Big Ten. And this is step one. Now, obviously, this is not a vintage Michigan team. Beating Michigan on Saturday does not mean you will eventually beat Ohio State this season, but it's a good test. So is an opportunity, particularly for USC to come in and say, yeah, we're legit. This is it. And I think it's a big game for Miller Moss. Their quarterback played so well against LSU. It's a big day for Lincoln Riley. It's just a huge opportunity for USC. We can get to the Michigan part, but I think if you're looking at the Big Ten and saying, all right, they added these teams out west, Oregon looks like they got their stuff together. How good can USC be? Or is this still going to be a league? This is basically Ohio State, Penn State, Michigan. Saturday's step one for USC to say, hey, hold on.
And this is the chance because they do have 5 Big Ten road games this year. Beyond visiting Michigan, they go to Minnesota in 2 weeks, then at Maryland. And those are their 3 off the West Coast trips. Their other 2 are at Washington and at UCLA. So how are you going to announce yourself? You're going to announce yourself at Michigan, at Minnesota, or at Maryland. No offense, but you're going to announce yourself at Michigan. They do get Penn State at home. They do get Nebraska at home. They get Wisconsin at home. So USC is still going to play some games that matter, but this is the head turner. But let's go to Michigan first to really dive in on Michigan here. Announcing Alex Orji as the starting quarterback, I certainly saw some pushback from people who said, like, why are you giving away the game plan? Why are you telling USC that you're changing starting quarterbacks and you're going to Alex Orji? Do you agree with that Sharon Moore should have kept this a secret? Or I kind of am subscribing to the idea of there's so much uncertainty. You would have been getting questions about it all week. Your players would have been getting questions about it. Everyone kind of knows the deal. State the obvious and let everybody move to the next thing. And so I understood why he wanted to say, yeah. We're changing quarterbacks. You guys see the same things we're seeing. What did you think of that move from Sharon Moore?
I could have gone either way with it. I mean,
okay.
I is it a little bit of gamesmanship? I mean, what are they doing? They spending that much time preparing for Davis Warren? It's not like you gotta, you're worried about him airing it out 45 yards deep or things like that. So I don't know. And I also think that if you're Lincoln Riley, you're saying, okay, Orji's going to start, but let's see where this goes.
Yeah.
Because they might bring Warren back in. So I think it's a small thing. Look at Michigan needs some quarterback play.
Yeah.
They're not going to trick their way to this. Alex Orji has to be good. They have to get something out of the quarterback position. They've gotten virtually nothing in 3 games. And that was the concern going into this season. And I thought the only way Michigan makes anything out of this season is, look, they have 4 games that they absolutely could lose and be, Texas, USC, Oregon, and Ohio State at the end of the year. They'll be underdogs in all these games. I don't know what the betting line is here, but I did not expect them to win Saturday. I don't expect them to beat any of those teams. Can their defense keep them in this season so that when they get to that Ohio State game at the end, maybe they only have 3 losses, maybe they only have 2 losses. They beat these other teams, and by the end of the season, the offense has caught up a little bit. They've developed a quarterback. And then you take your shot with Ohio State. Maybe you make a playoff, maybe you don't. That's kind of how I saw this season. The quarterback play has been worse than I think anybody could have expected. This offense doesn't look like it's got much hope at all. They've got Colston Loveland, who's terrific, but that's a tight end. The line is trying to come together. Can they? I really feel like this season is about developing an offense somehow and try to survive these games with as few losses as possible, that maybe you're still in playoff contention. But the way you look at the way they have played, not only are you looking at potential losses at USC and Oregon and obviously at Ohio State, but you're looking at them against USC. Oh, they're not at them. I don't know what I said, but they're at Illinois. I don't know. Michigan State. You can't really write in too many victories here for Michigan.
You don't think Kurt Cignetti is lying in wait for Michigan to come into Memorial Stadium and give the Hoosiers a chance for a signature win in year 1 there? So this is a philosophical question. And I think I know the answer, but I would be interested in potentially Michigan saying the heck with the answer. Can elite college football programs in this era take a step back year? And as people know, I am more intimately familiar with Ohio State than any other program because that's who I've been covering for almost 20 years. But Ohio State won the national title in 2002, brought back a lot of guys in 2003, had a very good year. And then in 2004, Ohio State lost 4 games and went to the Alamo Bowl. And they transitioned that year to start playing Troy Smith at quarterback. And it was just like, it kind of was a reset year that then set them up for 2005, which was only a 2-loss year. Then they're make the national championship game in 06 and 07. And it transitioned them from 02, 03 into 05, 06, 07. And Ohio State really hasn't had a season like that since. But it was productive for them. If this gets away from Michigan on Saturday, if the quarterback play, whoever it is, has not improved, if they fall to 2-2 in a bad way, is there any way they could just go to Jaden Davis, the freshman quarterback, acknowledge they are building for the future? They're not giving up on anything, but be realistic about it and use this year for some good rather than maybe chase your tail when you kind of whiffed at quarterback. Could a program do that? Would a fan base that still is wearing a bunch of national title merch, would they accept that? Or are those days gone that you'd be worried that everybody on your team would transfer and you get killed in recruiting and your fans would scream at you?
I think Michigan fan is most of them would be are realistic.
Okay.
First off, Michigan has never been the team that just rattles off 14-1, 13-1 seasons. The last 3 years have been the outlier. Harbaugh got his stuff together. They hit inside flushes on the transfer portal. NIL was great, was able to keep a lot of really, really good players. Connor Stallions was around, depending on who you want to ask. There was a lot going on for Michigan the last 3 years. And they were able to win a national championship that I'm not really sure a lot of Michigan fans thought they would ever win. I don't think it's not the expectation. Yeah. It certainly wasn't before. We need to win. Ohio State expects to win national championships. Georgia, Alabama, LSU, some of the others. I never thought Michigan was really into that. So now they won one. They got that taste, but I think there's a pretty big reasonability of like, look, we lost 13 guys to the NFL draft. We had 20-something guys, 22 or 4 at the combine. Harbaugh left. If there had been less chaos at the end of last year, could they have gotten somebody good in the portal? Right? Could have gotten anybody serviceable. I mean, they could have gone to the MAC and got some. Just anybody would have been better than this. And they didn't do that. I don't blame people. I mean, who was going to be the coach? Was Harbaugh going to be there? Who was getting suspended? It was such mayhem at the end of last year. Everyone was lawyering up. They didn't have time for the transfer portal quarterback. So I think that some schools, yeah, you can absolutely reboot. I think there are going to be, I'm fascinated with how many up and down seasons there's going to be in the future. It used to be, look, you recruit your guys. Every year you get a good recruiting class. You're going to build enough power in the program, enough stability in the program that you're going to win a lot of games and always have the advantage. So Ohio State would always have the biggest advantage but a Penn State and a Michigan, they're going to have so much talent over a 4 or 5 year recruiting period. They're going to be hard to beat. But now with the transfer portal, I don't know. You take a look at Florida State. They went from 12-0 to 0-3.
Yeah.
Every nice move they made in the portal last year has blown up on them this year.
Right.
And it hasn't worked. And now they're not very good. So this is the extreme measure. But how many teams? It doesn't mean that I would be surprised if Florida State is in the playoff a year from now. They get everything organized. They get the right transfers. A couple guys develop, and boom, they're 10-2 next year. Yeah, you'd be like, okay, it's Florida. It's not like the program's over. I just think you're going to have maybe more of these fluctuations. It's such a new era, but for Michigan, this isn't the year.
But can you?
But they're not going to just throw up the white towel against Michigan State and stuff.
No, can you build? Do you think? Like, I love roster building. I love like planning things out, developing guys, and like this
Michigan State program, right?
I love it.
Jason
but
Campbell.
Even like if we just had Jason Campbell on, if you throw, and it's not throwing the season away, but it's maybe prioritizing the future over the present. It's not ignoring the present. It's not trying to lose. You're not tanking for a draft pick, but it's saying, you know what? We're still going to respect everybody here. We're going to try our best, but we're going to really make sure we work in some young guys. We're going to get some experience. We're going to play a young quarterback, and we're going to think about how this will pay off for us in 2025 and 2026. The problem is, in a world where every single college football player is a free agent every year, if you play Jaden Davis for half a year and he's good, you might be developing him for somewhere else. So I don't know. Can anybody ever play for the future anymore? Or is this now officially a year by year sport until we get to collective bargaining, to contracts, to something where teams once again can build a roster?
I think you can at a Michigan level.
Okay.
If Jaden Davis becomes the it would help if Jaden Daniels was the quarterback.
Yeah, for real.
Right.
Get that back. He might come back from the NFL if Michigan NIL got it together. Yeah.
You go freshman. Let's say you go freshman, and the freshman becomes and there's some progress there, and you're like, man, you're going to be the starter next year. I don't really see a kid like that hitting the transfer portal to leave Michigan. You're giving the keys to the kingdom of a Michigan, a Penn State. You're not really leaving. Do they ask for more money or what? I mean, like, now if you're at a lower level school, lower level yeah, absolutely. Like, I know MAC coaches. I know you said Candle on. Like, Tuesday and Wednesday nights, the MAC-shin late in the season, like, they're terrified. Like, it's basically like the combine. Like, every single Big Ten, SEC, ACC coach is just watching their MAC-shin, being like, oh, look at this guy at Northern Illinois. Huh. That's a pretty nice play I just saw. You're terrible. So, yeah, you're a little worried about developing young guys, but I don't think that's the case at Michigan. I don't think you can develop a program scared, right? So I don't know when that moment is that they make the switch. If they make the switch, I don't know how developed they are or ready. It's too soon now to throw up the towel. I mean, hey, it's USC. What if they win? They're 3-1.
For sure.
Texas very well may end up 15,
100%.
16-0 this season. Like, I was at that game, and that is a great football team. So, you know, you might look back and be like, that wasn't even that bad of a loss. But I think clearly the Michigan offense has got massive problems that are not easily solved, and that's why I don't think they're going to win a lot of win that many games. But I think when you're Michigan, I think your fans will understand. Look, let's say we go 8-4. Let's say, do they want to lose by a lot in Columbus? No, but let's say you never know with that game. You just never really know. Get to that game. Can we hold off the others that are coming and develop? I don't think a Michigan should ever be scared of putting really good young talent out in the field. Because look, if a kid's going to leave, if you've committed to one of these types of programs and then you're going to leave after showing out, I'm not sure you really want that kid anyway. Like, where are you going?
Now you sound like a coach. If you don't want to be here, we didn't want you anyway. No, I know. But if someone comes in with $5 million and drops it on his head, you know, I agree.
Michigan needs to raise $5 million because let me tell you what, you've been to Ann Arbor many times.
Lovely.
Do you ever think they're poor?
No.
I mean, I love the crying of poor from these schools like Notre Dame and Michigan. We can't compete with like, what? Like, Notre Dame, they paint their building in gold. Like, you guys got money. Like, Michigan can't raise the money to keep their players. No, you can raise the money. No, there's nothing in Michigan. You go, boy, if only they got a couple bucks around here.
If you're a Notre Dame player in an NIL meeting and they're like, I don't know, man, you're just like,
see that dome?
It's gold. It's gold. So I think Wisconsin's in a similar spot. And I do think playing a young quarterback can wrap a coach in a protective bubble if you sell it the right way. And I think it can energize a fan base rather than continuing to play a guy at quarterback who is just not the guy. No offense to that player, but he's clearly not going to be the starter next year. And he's not giving you a great chance to win right now. If Michigan loses, and this is only a Michigan gets its doors blown off by USC scenario. And I double checked. It's only a 5.5 point spread. USC favored by less than a touchdown in the big house. If they get their doors blown off, then it's like, well, what? Like, we're not competing anyway with veteran quarterbacks, with older quarterbacks. Maybe let's try our young guy. A, maybe he'll be better anyway. And B, even if he's not, how much worse can he be? And we'll be getting ready for the future. I think with Tyler Van Dyke out for the year at Wisconsin, I asked Luke Fickell about this after the game. Mabry Matoyer, who was their freshman quarterback, again, rather than like play a backup who wasn't good enough to win the job, why not try something? It's a young, talented guy. Maybe you catch lightning in a bottle, but even if you don't, there's a purpose down the line. So that's why I think this is potentially two paths for Michigan. Doors blown off. Maybe you start thinking about Jane Davis. You beat USC, you're right in the thick of the playoff race. So I agree with that. Let's talk about USC. Is Lincoln Riley a good coach? Because, remember back in the day, like a baby fawn wandering through the woods of Norman, Oklahoma. Oh, where did he come from? He came from East Carolina, and everybody loved him. They called him Bambi. Did you know they called him Lincoln Bambi Riley? Dan Wetzel, it was beautiful. Beautiful. Oh, heartwarming. He was a top 5 coach for everybody. He made the playoffs the first 3 years. He was a head coach at Oklahoma. And the last time he made the playoff was 2019. And now he hasn't made the playoffs since. And it's funny. It's one of these things. There was a time when Lincoln Riley and Ryan Day were often compared, right? They took over. I mean, that Gene Smith at Ohio State hired Ryan Day because Lincoln Riley at Oklahoma succeeded following Bob Stoops, and Gene Smith talked to Joe Castiglione. It was like, hey, that worked pretty well. Why don't we do that here? And you compared Ryan Day and Lincoln Riley a lot. And now Ryan Day is on a hot seat of man, you better make the play. You better win a national championship or beat Michigan. And Lincoln Riley just went lost 5 games last year. Just disappeared off the scene. Everybody forgot about him. And now maybe they're good again. What do you think of Lincoln Riley? Do you think he's still a great coach, or was he a little bit of it was a hot moment there at Oklahoma, and now he's good, but maybe he's not a genius?
First off, he's from Muleshoe, Texas. One of the great town names of all time.
Muleshoe. I didn't know mules wore shoes.
You'd think he's kind of he's got this doesn't seem like a kid from Muleshoe.
Yeah.
Come up tough in Muleshoe, man.
Yeah.
Great name.
Always dreamed of going to Hollywood. The kids in Muleshoe just dream. Growing up with dreams of palm trees in Southern California.
That's why people thought he'd never leave Oklahoma. What I think of Lincoln Riley is obviously unbelievable offensive coach. 3 Heisman Trophy winners, 4, 3. Kyler Murray, Baker Mayfield, and
Jalen Hurts was second. Caleb Williams. Oh yeah, Caleb Williams.
Yeah, so we had 3.
Yep.
Offense didn't have the defense, and he was able to feast on a Big 12 where the difference in resources between Texas, Oklahoma, and everyone else is extraordinary. And so he was able to do very well in the Big 12. It's a great job. Oklahoma always wins, always. They had maybe a couple years spurt, but that's it. Very Ohio State-like. It's very rare that they're not absolutely rolling. Mm-hmm. And he had that deal. There was pressure on him because they couldn't get that next step. They lost a overtime playoff game to Oklahoma, but they'd get to the playoff generally and get blown out. He grabs the USC job. You can lose 5 games out there and they're not going to kill you. They're going to get on their boats down in the Balboa Bay Yacht Club and complain about you, but they're not going to fire you. It's not quite the same.
Have you been to the Balboa Bay Yacht Club, Dan? That sounds.
Do I look like someone who would get invited to the Balboa Bay Yacht Club? No.
You would infiltrate it. You would.
If somebody watching Kings of the North would like to invite me. No, I just know it's
By the way, this is why they're not really part of Kings of the North, because I get it. I understand that they're in the Big Ten, but if you have a yacht club, I don't know. And I know there's water at Washington, but it's not the same. The Balboa, it's either the Balboa Bay Yacht Club or Kings of the North. Not both.
That's put in Bay. That's a big, that's right. King of the North Yacht
That's
Club.
A yacht. You can have yacht
Put in Bay, right? That's good.
Absolutely.
A boat ramp on an inland lake in Minnesota. Yes. That's what we got. So I don't know what kind of coach he is, to put it plainly, and I think we're going to find out. Obviously, he's a good coach. He's terrific offensively. He can get great quarterbacks to come play for him, and he coaches them up. I mean, Miller Moss has been. I think he probably inherited him. He was awesome against LSU. He played terrific. Yeah. And they were going to – I love Miller Moss. Last year at the end of the season, Caleb Williams is going pro. He's going to be number 1 pick. And they hold a press conference. Lincoln Riley says, I'm bringing in 2 guys from the portal. And then USC goes and plays, I think, in the Holiday Bowl. And Miller Moss tears it, just fantastic. And then the next day, Miller Moss says his phone rings the next morning, and it's Lincoln Riley going, "We're not bringing anyone in. Don't go anywhere. Don't go anywhere."
Yeah.
Like, he didn't believe in him.
Yeah.
And then boom. So that's the development of a quarterback. Now he's a surprise anyway. Miller Moss looked great against LSU, and we're going to see how he looks Saturday against a very good Michigan defense. Whatever Michigan's quarterback problems are, they still got a D. And so this is going to be a really interesting game. How good is Lincoln Riley as a coach? I think we're finding out. Is he worth all the hype? Is he this or that? Has he ever truly done anything? I think you're right with the Ryan Day comparison. There was this whole bit for a while where just taking that, if your program is rolling, or even if it's not, sometimes just promoting. The other's Dabo Swinney, right? He wins 2 national titles, guy had no coaching experience. And he just has all this energy, and he turns Clemson into something. So you keep who you've got, keep the thing going. It works. And now Oklahoma obviously went outside that with Brent Venables, and we'll see where we're at. But I think it's a very big game for Lincoln Riley and USC. I expect they will win, but they kind of better win. I think if they come up to Michigan and a not great Michigan team beats them, and you're like, what are we doing here?
But let me ask about that. Sometimes it feels like to me, if you are in the spotlight and close and not getting over the top, that actually creates more pressure for a coach than just falling off a cliff. That Lincoln Riley, right? They as you said, they had the double overtime game in the semifinal against Georgia in 17. They should have won that game and gone to the national championship against Bama. They didn't. And then, like, by the time they're in the third straight playoff, they get their doors blown off by the the LSU offense in 2019. And they're like, oh man, like this Oklahoma defense, like it can't stack up. And that kind of stays with them a little bit. But then he's 8-5 at USC last year. And I feel like maybe nationally we just like, oh, well, they're not that good anymore. He's not that good anymore. And you just kind of ignore him a little bit, as opposed to when he was making a semifinal every year. It's like, how is your defense this bad? When Ryan Day is doing this at Ohio State and losing 3 straight to Michigan, it's like, how are you losing to Michigan? But if you're just mediocre, we don't worry about it. We just vanish. So is there pressure on Lincoln Riley, or is he so far off the radar now that people will just be like, oh, well, yeah, he's not as good as he used to be?
No, I think there's pressure this weekend on him. I totally agree with you. I mean, I understand why there's pressure on Ryan Day. I get it, but it's like, I got here, right? Yeah. Same thing with look, I got you to the playoffs every time, and I lose in double over. I mean, that's right. Not coaching. That's one lucky play here or there. Something's going down when you're double OT. No, I think that's kind of what I'm saying. Like, at this point, because Michigan has looked so average, I think everyone expects USC to win. And I think Trojan fans expect to win. And if they come in and that offense, the only way Michigan's winning this game is the offense doesn't work against their defense. And somehow they mop together like 19 points and win 19-16 or something like that. And then all of a sudden everyone's going to be like, what in the world? Right? Yeah. This isn't going to work against a Big Ten defenses. It's not. What is going on? Can Lincoln? I think there's enormous pressure on Lincoln Riley, not just because of this move, but because they would be a lot better if Michigan had just had last year's schedule and looked 3-0 and had gotten 3 easy games. And there's a lot of, like, Texas got the benefit of being like, yeah, we whooped Michigan. And even though people were looking and go, man, they look too good against Fresno. But now that Michigan's sort of damaged goods, I mean, the reigning national champs are just a plucky underdog here, Doug.
Yeah,
nice. just a bootstrap scrap them against these mean Trojans that lost 5 games last year. But here we are. I think there's a lot of pressure on USC. I think this is a fascinating game for what's going to happen in the Big Ten. Not necessarily because winner's going to win the Big Ten. Just where the heck is USC on this?
And will either of them matter? Like the winner will still matter. The loser might just sort of be like off the radar. Well, they're not going to make the Big Ten championship game. So good. I think Bambi should be in the spotlight a little bit here. So this is good. Okay, good. There's some pressure on USC. It's not just like off the radar. Oh, well, it was 3,000 miles away. I'm curious about West Coast travel in the first year. So all the games where the West Coast Big Ten teams are coming Midwest or East for conference games. And likewise, when you're going out there, like Ohio State going out to Oregon, when Penn State goes out to USC, like I'm curious about how that affects anybody. It's a 3:30 game on Saturday, so it's not like a 9 a.m. body clock for USC, but I am curious about that. But I'm more curious overall just about what USC is going to be. As a reminder, 2002 to 2008, that 7-year period, they finished in the top 4 every year with multiple national titles in there. That's who they were. The 15 years since then, they finished in the top 10 twice. So they went from 7 straight top 4 to 2 out of 15 top 10. This should, I know they have yacht clubs, but this should be a good football team. And the main thing is it's a lot like Iowa. They hung on to a coordinator too long on the side of the ball where they weren't good. And it dragged down the entire team. Iowa made the change at offensive coordinator. Finally, USC made the change at defensive coordinator, got rid of Alex Grinch. Danton Lynn has done a great job. EPA per play. Defense overall at USC in 2022, 117, and 2023, 128 nationally. Horrible. This year, 69. It's only 2 games, but it's moderately better. But USC should be good. Is that fair to say, Dan, before we let you go? Like, can we assign that to the yacht club folks? You should be good at football? Or is it only we talk about USC when Snoop Dogg and Will Ferrell are at practice and they're cranking out first-round draft picks and winning national titles, and then when they're not good, it's fine. Nobody cares. Go make a movie.
USC should be great. 1 out of every 8 Americans live in the state of California.
What? That can't be right. That can't be right.
It's like 40 million of them or something. Yeah. It's the biggest state in the country. They got one team that's ever any good. One team. All of Southern California. You want to stay home and play? Come play for us. That's what Pete Carroll did. He lined up everybody in the state. He got all the kids. Then you go out and pick your guys. You want to come live in LA? I mean, we're downtown. We got Will Ferrell. We got Snoop Dogg. We got the sunshine. We got the song, the cheerleaders. We got the palm trees, all of that stuff. Somewhere along the way, USC became a mess, and they couldn't get their stuff together. I mean, they've got so much talent, and all these kids started leaving instead of staying. All the quarterbacks, right? C.J. Stroud. You know what they really need was defense. I remember it was 3 years ago. Pat Forty and I, we were sitting at the Michigan State game, and this freshman, Mason Graham, starts showing out. He's from Anaheim, California. I'm like, what the heck? I look, true freshman. He was a verbal commit to Boise State. And Michigan comes in and grabs him. He commits to them. And then I looked on the little chart, like a week later, USC offers him. Like USC hadn't offered. I don't know if they ever heard of him until he commits to Michigan. Obviously, Mason Graham's going to be a first-round draft pick. Like they say, there's no linemen out there. They weren't looking for the linemen. You can't miss. You see the size of Mason Graham, you can't miss the guy. They missed him. Like, you can't miss from guys, but there's so much talent in Southern California. You're the only major program. And most kids, the best predictor of success in college sports is proximity to talent. Kids want to play near their home school. They want to play where their family can play. USC is an unbelievable university. It's got a great campus. This historic building. They got great tradition. You're in LA. Where are you going? Everybody started leaving. And so if you just organize that the way Pete Carroll did, obviously Pete Carroll is a legendary coach. He won a Super Bowl and a national championship. But you get it organized, you're going to be great. USC has no excuse to ever not be great. They have all the advantages. It's just people kind of forget, look at how many guys left Southern California to go elsewhere when those kids, if you just get some of those guys to stay at USC, you're going to win.
Julian Lewis is their quarterback recruit in the class of 2025. People keep trying to flip him. He's visited Indiana and stuff. If they get him, that'll be good for their future. Their recruiting rankings right now, class of 2025, they're 13th in the nation. The class they signed in 2024 was 17th. Like, this should be a top 10 recruiting class and a top 10 team. So we'll put it on. That's fair. Like, what I don't like, Dan, is sometimes I think we in college football media or sports media, there are some teams that if they aren't winning a national championship or world, whatever, a title every couple years, but they're good and they're always in the mix and they're not there, then we're on them for not getting over the top. And then there are other places when they peak, we love them. And then when they stink and vanish, nobody cares. And it's like, okay, let's just establish what USC is. You helped me, Dan. Bambi's in the spotlight. Bambi's in the spotlight on Saturday, right? And it doesn't mean, and it's not like Michigan can just go lose and turn the page, but like I think we need to be realistic about both these programs. And it's great for USC. Danton Lynn is a great hire. You steal the guy from UCLA and you make him your defensive coordinator and you're off to the races. Congrats to Lincoln Riley for finally making that change. But that's why these are two like traditional powers, two big names. This is great for the Big Ten. Boy, oh boy, let's get a big TV rating. But it's super interesting to me for what happens next at both places and how we view these two programs the rest of this year and then going into the next couple of years. I would watch on Saturday. I think it really matters in those ways.
100%.
All right. He's Dan Wetzel. You can find his work at Yahoo and also at the College Football Inquirer. And we always appreciate, Dan, you taking time out of your week to join us here every Tuesday on Kings of the North.
Love it. See you next Tuesday.
All right. Thanks, Dan. All right, we will be back after this break with Jeremy Werner talking about Illinois football next on Kings of the North. Joined now on Kings of the North by Jeremy Werner, the publisher of the Illini Inquirer. 15 years you've been covering Illinois football.
Yeah, it feels like it's been a long time, but finally I'm starting to see some competitive football consistently, Doug. Bret Bielema, 21-19, over 500. That's pretty big accomplishment for Illinois. So, yeah, leading into a big game, top 25 matchup. This is the earliest I've covered a ranked Illinois team. This is the first time I've ever covered a 3-0 Illinois football team. So it's we'll see if they can make the most of it and have a really good season, a surprise season.
So I thought Illinois was going to have a bad year. I think I picked them to finish last in the Big Ten. I was kind of alone in that, but I was wrong. Why was I so wrong? What has it been about this Illinois team that's been so effective so far? And are you surprised the way they've played, or did you see this coming?
I can actually pat myself on the back once for a prediction. I actually predicted them to go 3-0. I predicted them to go about 12th in the Big Ten. I think I thought they'd be competitive. They have been consistently competitive under Bret Bielema, in part because he's just a good coach. He's a really good CEO, and Illinois has not had that coach in a really long time. Just all the details, the intelligence about football. He's just really good. And there's a reason he won at Wisconsin, besides just being the guy after Barry Alvarez. And there's a reason he had some good seasons at Arkansas in one of the toughest conferences ever when he was there in the SEC. So I think he's really good at what he does. But most of all, it's year 2 of Aaron Henry as a defensive coordinator. Yeah. Barry Lunny, it's year 3. So they finally have some continuity in the program. And they got guys who have been here for 3 or 4 years in the system under this head coach. So you feel like natural progress should happen. Of course, last year was a step back, but I didn't think it was like, oh my gosh, this thing's going downhill in a hurry, because they were so close to being 8-4 last year. So they lost some excruciating games. But the biggest reason is, for the first time under Bret Bielema, they have a returning quarterback in Luke Altmaier, who I thought proved to be a Big Ten playmaker and just went through some growing pains. He's taken the next step. And the other part is Bret Bielema went into the transfer portal and got some guys. J.C. Davis at left tackle is going to play in the NFL. He was a really huge get for them. And then Melvin Priestley from Grambling State ended up being a guy we didn't talk about a lot in the offseason until we heard from the coaches that this guy might start at right tackle. And he's been really good, a huge addition to kind of shore up that offensive line. But Zachary Franklin felt like, to me, one of the most under the radar guys, even though he's the active NCAA receiving yards leader. Didn't have a great year at Ole Miss, got hurt, kind of sidetracked his career, but he was a go-to guy at UTSA when Barry Lunny Jr. was the offensive coordinator there. And having him and Pat Bryant, has given Luke Altmaier and in Illinois a passing attack that you just don't see a lot in this conference, to be honest with you. Like they are a really good passing attack that gives them a chance. And then they added some guys in the secondary that I think really help give them depth. And they've been better than I thought on defense, to be honest with you. And that's probably the biggest surprise that I have had. But I'm not surprised they've had a good start, but it gets a lot tougher now that Big Ten play starts.
Okay, a lot to cover within all of that. That's a great breakdown off the top. 2022, they're one of the 10 best defenses in the country. Ryan Walters gets the head coaching job at Purdue based on the performance of that defense. Last year, by the efficiency metrics we like to cite, they went from the 3rd best defense to the 75th best defense. You say year 2 of Aaron Henry, adding some guys in the secondary. That's certainly where I had questions, but this is, it's like not like Devin Weatherspoon's not growing on a tree. Right. Jerzon Newton's not growing on a tree, but this is looking right. I mean, it's hard to say, okay, you're a top 10 defense 3 weeks in, but reminiscent, right? This is like Illinois getting back to what made them so successful a couple of years ago. Again, not something I necessarily saw coming. Did you think there'd be a leap Aaron Henry year 2? It just would take some time.
I thought they'd be better, Doug, because they had to be better. Right. There was no question. Like, I didn't think they could get worse than what they were, especially against Kansas, against Northwestern, against Indiana, giving up, 35 plus points. Like, that's just not sustainable. But the other thing is they lost a lot of talent, right? Like, there wasn't a Devin Witherspoon here. There wasn't a Johnny Newton. So you had to replace all these guys. But what kind of went under the radar is last year, after you lost Devin Witherspoon and Sidney Brown, who was an All-American, Quan Martin, who was an All-American, 3 All-Americans in the secondary, plus you lost some linebackers. That was a really inexperienced defense with an inexperienced defensive coordinator. And Aaron took his growing pains, but you also had players on the back end in, guys like Taz Nicholson did not play as well as they thought. Matthew Bailey, who was supposed to be a starter for them, played only 22 snaps against Penn State, and they were awful at strong safety for the rest of the year. But then they had to play a bunch of freshmen, and they just got exposed. Now you have Xavier Scott in his second year as a starter, Miles Scott, the free safety, in his second year as a starter. Those guys have combined for 7 takeaways in the first 2 games. So they're getting smarter. They're wiser. They can, as Ryan Walters used to say, pull the trigger. When they see something, they pull the trigger and then go make the play.
That Jalen Daniels pick on the little bubble in week 2, that was such a great example of pull the trigger, have confidence, be a playmaker, but don't be afraid and go get it. That's an unbelievable play. That's a confident defense to be able to make a play like that.
Yeah, now there's no hesitation. Last year, there's hesitation to do that because they didn't trust it because they'd never been in that situation before. Now they've been through those wars. They've been through those battles and they know, I can do this. And now they trust it. So that's a sign of good coaching by Aaron Henry.
Okay.
Yeah. The other thing we have to bring up is Bret Bielema fired 2 defensive assistants last year, including Andy Boo, who's his linebackers coach for 3 years, who I thought did a pretty decent job. But he fired Antonio Finellis, who was a former player of his at Wisconsin, after 1 year as a cornerbacks coach. Brought in Corey Parker, who coached Quinyon Mitchell at Toledo. And I think he's made a big impact. I think he's really helped those guys. But and then the defensive front, they're a little undersized up there, but Gabe Backus and Seth Coleman have been all Big Ten players. Those guys are playing pretty well. T-Raw Edwards is a 3rd-year nose tackle. Terrence Jameson's a really good defensive line coach. They brought in Dennis Briggs Jr. So I still got questions of whether they can stop the run, but there's no question that this secondary has taken a huge leap. I think it's a strength of the team. I think they have depth there. They can get takeaways. Last year, they had 15 takeaways. The year prior, they had about 34. So that's a big difference in 8 wins to 5 wins, right? That pretty much explains it right there. Like, now they can take the ball away. And if you get takeaways and you have good quarterback play, you can go pretty far in this conference. And I think that's what's happening right now.
So good quarterback play. I mean, I should have known, right? This is the whole thing with transfer quarterbacks most of the time. Year 2, right? Year 2, when you get a transfer who's not just a one and done guy. Again, Joe Burrow, Michael Penix, Bo Nix, it's across the board. Jaden Daniels, it's not right away. But I didn't know about Luke Altmaier coming in this year. And it seems like hearing on the broadcast and that kind of thing, that maybe he was in his own head a little bit. And is he in a better place mentally this year? And then you add a playmaker like Zachary Franklin, multiple guys in the backfield, what Pat Bryant has done. It seems like he's just more comfortable, which maybe isn't a surprise, but I wasn't 100% certain he was going to get there.
There was a lot of pressure on him last year coming into a program that had a breakthrough season the year before to kind of do the same thing. Tommy DeVito was a 6th-year quarterback when he came into Illinois and just stabilized the position that was awful. Like only Rutgers was worse at quarterback than Illinois the previous 6 or 7 seasons. Just a really disastrous position for Illinois. And Tommy just took care of the ball, hit singles and doubles. Luke comes in as a freshman, not as a freshman, but his first year as a starter into the Big Ten. There were 7 picks in his first 3 games. We're seeing Caleb Williams do something similar with the Bears, right? Like these rookie quarterbacks coming to the NFL, you got to take your lumps. You got to learn from experience. And he did, and he got better. His last 6 games as a starter, he had a 66% completion rate, 10 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. But he got concussed against Minnesota. John Paddock comes in, something we will never see again. The heater he got on as a backup, and Luke got benched. And I feel like the national narrative was Luke got benched because he didn't play well. Luke didn't deserve to be benched. It's just John Paddock threw for a school record 500-plus yards here in a win over Indiana and had a pretty good game against Northwestern as well. But Luke proved himself as a Big Ten playmaker. He's got a good arm. He's got great touch. He's got great accuracy. And he can be a threat in the run game. So the question was, can he lead? Can he lift a team? Can he get better? And he had to quicken his decisions. He had to read things a little bit better. And Illinois surrounded him with good talent. They got 2 tackles who can protect him. They got 2 wide receivers with Pat Bryant and Zachary Franklin that can really make plays. They still got to establish the run game, which is a big part moving forward. But Luke has taken a step forward in his first 3 games. I thought he made some great plays against Kansas. I'm interested to see if Illinois leans into the passing attack a little bit more as they go into Big Ten play, because that is their strength. He's got huge tasks ahead, right? You got Nebraska on the road. You got Penn State on the road. But I think he has said the right things. I think he's just more comfortable. I think he's more confident. And he's battle scarred, man. Like, to be a Big Ten starting quarterback, even at a place like Illinois, it's not Ohio State, it's not Michigan, but you take arrows when you don't play well, right? And now he's learned how to deal with that, and he's learned how to live with some of those things. And I think experience is the best teacher, both mentally and physically for him.
Again, just a huge shout out to Bret Bielema and that staff in a world where it feels like everybody's always looking for tackles in the portal. Like J.C. Davis just absolutely jumped off the screen in spring ball. It's like, how did Illinois go find this guy? And to find the right tackle is too. It's just it's a sign. Bret Bielema knows what he's doing here. So now going into this game against Nebraska, Friday night in Lincoln, like what does Illinois have to do to compete here? Because we've been talking about this. This is right up our alley. This is a great Northern game. 2 3-0 teams that have looked really good, but we're going to find out much more about both because the level is raised with this competition here. Listen, Kansas wins a good win, though.
Yeah. What
does Illinois have to do to go into Lincoln and have a chance in this one?
Well, you can't beat yourself, right? So penalties, which was an issue against Central Michigan, has to, not be there. Luke Altmaier's taking incredible care of the ball. They have 1 turnover through the first 3 games, and that's not even Luke. So they need to take care of the ball. But those things are understood, right? I think you got to make Dylan Raiola look like a freshman quarterback in his first Big Ten game, right? And I think it's good you get him early, even though he's looked very good and he's very talented. And that is, speaking of quarterback problems, Nebraska's had quarterback problems the last several years, really since Adrian Martinez, and I didn't think they got the most out of him. So they need to make him put pressure in his face. Seth Coleman, Gabe Akis, and that crew need to put pressure in his face. But then when he makes a mistake, the secondary needs to take advantage of it and get those takeaways. So they need to make him look like a freshman quarterback. I'm really concerned about Illinois' ability to run the ball because the biggest change Matt Rule has brought to that program is they are strong in the trenches now. Like that just never happened under Scott Frost. And they know that they have to compete in the trenches to compete in the Big Ten. And Hutmacher, the nose tackle, is great. Ty Robinson feels like he's been there 7 years. So that's going to be a difficult group because Illinois has not run the football well, which is rare for Bret Bielema. But they didn't run the football well last year, and it hurt them. And now they aren't running the football very well right now. The interior of the offensive line has really, really struggled. So I think Barry Loney Jr., the offensive coordinator, I'm wondering if this is the game they start to lean into the passing game to set up the run game rather than vice versa. Because they've kind of tried to establish the run in first halves. It hasn't worked. And then they lean into the passing attack, the RPO, play actions, taking deep shots. And they've really had a lot of success coming out in the second half. So they need to start fast and put pressure on Dylan Raiola to score points early in this game. So I don't think I'd pound my head against a wall. That is Nebraska's defensive front. I'd really try to get my playmakers the ball in space, and then maybe that eases them up, pulls the safeties back, and maybe that opens up the running attack of Caden Fagan. Freshman Khalil Valentine's been pretty impressive here.
Yeah.
Too.
I'll tell you what, man. That Kansas win, again, coming off the win over Central Michigan, but Illinois made about 6 or 7 just winning plays in the back part of that game, because there were just moments where it felt like, oh, maybe this is going to be one of those. You play well and Kansas finds a way in the end. And it was just winning football on both sides of the ball. So really impressed with where Illinois has been so far. Super interesting team. And I've been so glad that Bret Bielema is back here. This is where he belongs, right? Like, I thought the Big Ten missed him when he was gone. He's, no offense to him, he doesn't belong in the SEC. He belongs up here. So Matt Rule versus Bret Bielema, this is where it's at. People should be excited for this, Jeremy. If people want to follow your work this week and during the rest of the season, where can they find you?
Yeah, at jwerner247 on Twitter, and you can check us out at IlliniInquirer.com. And I agree with you. This is a legacy job for Bret Bielema, right? Like, he's kind of known as the guy after the guy at Wisconsin, whether you call it a failure or not at Arkansas. But if he gets consistent bowl games here for 10, 15 years, they're going to build him a statue here, right? So I think it's a great fit for both of them. And I think it's a huge couple weeks ahead, because if they can win one of these games and stay ranked for the next while, I think Illinois can be a surprise team, because they got a quarterback and they got a defense that can make plays.
That'd be quite a thing. Like, you got the Red Grange, Bret Bielema. That's what we're talking about. The big 3 of Illinois football. I'm here for it. Jeremy, thank you for your time, and enjoy this one on Friday night.
Thanks, Doug.
All right. Thanks to Jeremy Werner for that one. That's a good one. 2 bangers, 2 Friday night bangers. Listen, we hope you get out to a high school. If you're a football fan, we hope you get out to a high school Friday game. Right? What's better than football Friday in high school? But then come back maybe and watch like the second half. We have Stanford at Syracuse and Illinois at Nebraska on Friday night for good Northern games. Before we get out of here, a couple other things. Scott Satterfield, Cincinnati coach, announced that Philip Wilder, the guy who was supposed to be on their depth chart, was their starting right tackle for week 1, but has not played. He should be back this week. Cincinnati against Houston. Hosting Houston, that's another good one. Like, again, Cincinnati off to a good start. Their offensive line is quite deep, quite veteran. But to get the guy they think is going to be their starting right tackle back would be really good. Wanted to note that it seems like Indiana people were excited about this. Indiana's rolling. We got to do more. We got to do more with Indiana, and we will. But on the Monday Night Football broadcast, Joe Buck and Troy Aikman, it was noted, I wasn't watching. Landis was watching because the Eagles lost in the end, and that's why he's not here today. He's actually not off doing other reporting. He's just in mourning because the Birds lost. But Joe Buck went to Indiana, did not graduate because I think he went off and started doing broadcasting things. But he went to Indiana, and Troy Aikman, he went to UCLA. Actually went to Oklahoma, then transferred to UCLA. But anyway, Indiana beat the pants off UCLA in football the other day. So they talked about that. And Joe Buck was singing songs, and Troy Aikman said, "I like your coach," about Curt Cignetti at Indiana. So I'm sure Indiana will be excited about that. And then Joe Buck told Troy Aikman, "Stay away. Don't let UCLA come steal the Indiana coach." So how far have we come? Indiana over UCLA getting talked about on a Monday night. This is news that came out as we record this on Tuesday, that Tennessee, the SEC does things. This is the thing. It's like, it's a regional sport, but it's a national sport. And so this is how coaching salaries went whoop, through the roof in college football, because the SEC, with its desperation, threw money around, and they blew the doors off of the coaching, the contract standards, the norm. They keep setting a new norm for coaching salaries. And then in the North, you have 2 choices. You either can have all your good coaches go to the South for all the money, or you can overspend to keep up. So this is one of those things, again, in a world, do anything you want. The regional priorities are different. The way you view things are different. Desperation levels are different. Ain't nothing more desperate than a losing Southern football team. They will find money they don't have. They are selling grandma's jewels if they're not winning at football. And then everybody else has to respond. So I know like sometimes people are afraid of oversight and people are afraid of regulation. But if we got some in college football, and everybody wants a free market, except that, there's a lot of stuff in sports that is not a completely free market. But there's some things we are never going to be able to prevent the South from doing. We just have to acknowledge that they're going to do it. And then we have to decide, are you going to try to keep up to their crazy standard, or are we going to live in a more normal world? And if you want to compete at the highest level, sometimes you have to go along with their crazy standard. So the point here is this. Tennessee in the South announced today that they are adding a 10% talent fee to their ticket prices. And this is because we are entering a revenue sharing world. 22.5% of the average athletic department revenue. That's what will be dispersed to players. So the more revenue you bring in, then the more revenue you can hand out. So the thing is, they're adding the talent fee like this is paying players with your extra ticket prices. But the ticket prices are already part of the revenue that's going to the players. So this is what we have to be on the lookout for. This is not a conversation about any of you who are like mad that players are getting paid. I mean, we're going to be a show where we think that young men who are putting their brains and bodies on the line for our entertainment should be compensated for their skill and their hard work and the danger. We just think they should be compensated. But this is now the time for the athletic departments to steal your money because they can't control themselves, because they can't control their spending, because they've lived a certain way. And so when you live in a mansion, because you've never had to pay the staff, and you live in a mansion, and now it turns out that all these people who have been cleaning your house and serving your food for free for 100 years, now you got to pay them. Now, when your friends come over for dinner, you're like, I'm sorry, there's a 10% surcharge because we actually have to pay the staff. And it's like, maybe you don't need to live in a 34-bedroom house. So this is where we are. So we need to be on the lookout for bloated athletic departments asking you to pay for their bloat under the guise of talent fees. Now, we're not saying that only the South is bloated. There's plenty of Northern bloat as well. But there might be more Southern bloat. So this is just new, and they'll explain it. Oh, yeah, it's going to the players, but they already have a lot of money. They're already selling out stadiums and getting a bunch of TV dough. So you're just a person who likes football. So we must monitor them reaching into your pockets and asking you to solve every problem because they don't know how to manage their money. They're already asking you, oh, if you didn't give enough in NIL, sorry, our team stinks. It's your fault. That is not the world we can live in. We must refuse to live in that world where fans are blamed if the teams are bad. And then, well, if you want us to compete, got a talent fee. So we'll see where this goes. And I would like to say, well, that's just Tennessee being Tennessee, but that's not usually how it works. Because everybody up here is going to be, talent fee. Talent fee. I got a talent fee for you. This sport sometimes is such a good sport. You go to a game on a Saturday. How good is that? And then the rest of it makes you pull your hair out. All right. Purdue also had to get its stuff together. One other thing I wanted to talk about. Ryan Walters coming off like the worst defeat in program history, 66-7 to Notre Dame. They're going to Oregon State, which just lost to Oregon 49-14. Ryan Walters said they got physically beat up, right? So like this is a test for Purdue. And again, we want to be aware of writing off any team too early, of giving up on anybody, unless they're going to play a young quarterback, and then everybody can give up together. This is big for their bowl hopes. So you just start playing the schedule game with Purdue, and they're 1-1. Who didn't think they'd be 1-1, right? No one did really think they're going to beat Notre Dame. But like, this is big. And so this is a super interesting recovery spot. Purdue was only 1 of 12 on third down against Notre Dame. They averaged more than 10 yards that they needed to get on third down. So can't live that way. And Oregon State likes to run the ball. And Ryan Walters thinks they got out physicaled. He said, we have to own the worst loss in program history. So we talked about it with Jason Campbell. We've seen it happen with Notre Dame this year, like not reacting well to a win. Let's see how Purdue reacts to an embarrassing loss. Like, is this who they are? It's like, oh, Landis, I think, kind of thinks maybe like this is who they are. I still think they're going to be or have a chance to be better than people expect. But then when you get thumped, you have to come back and respond the right way. All right. Wednesday, I think we're going to call it Would You Rather Wednesday. And we'll have a couple different scenarios. We'll have a bacon scenario. We'll have a coach staying at a school versus chasing a bigger job scenario. We'll have a scenario about would you rather your team play an easy, boring schedule and be undefeated in September, or play good games against good teams and maybe take a loss? Because sometimes, as fans, sometimes we say, I want my team to play good opposition in the non-conference as long as they win. It's like, well, you're playing a good team. Sometimes you risk losing. So we'll talk about a couple different scenarios. And we're also going to have our old friend Shahan Jeharaja on to talk about, we'll have a draft. Bill and Shahan and I will have a draft of first and second year quarterbacks, only 2 years or less in college football. Who would you take for the rest of their careers? So this is a Dylan Raiola. This is an Avery Johnson. This is an Aiden Childs. This is an Arch Manning. This is a Nico Iamaleava. This is a Jackson Arnold conversation. There are a lot of young quarterbacks that are super interesting. And we will talk about them. And we'll talk a little bit about Oklahoma, Tennessee, which is not a Northern game, but is a game of note this weekend. So for this one, we want to thank Jason Campbell, Toledo head coach, for joining us. We want to thank Jeremy Werner for coming on and making us smarter about Illinois. And as always on Tuesdays, we want to thank Dan Wetzel for his time. Thanks to our great producer, Mike Hirostowski, for making everything here look good and sound good. We will catch you guys back on Wednesday. For now, I'm Doug Lesmerises, and that was Kings of the North.